Hey everyone, this is Matt. I'm going to try to keep this video short. This video is an addendum to the video that I put out yesterday of the updated Dark Magician December 2021 deck profile. So a lot of people in the comments and also in like the various Dark Magician groups commented on the fact that Nadir Servant at 1 is, some people felt it was bizarre, some people felt that it should at least go to 2, and few people even suggested that like one of the things you could do to get Nadir Servant at least to 2 is either remove the second Dark Magical Circle or possibly remove one of the Solemn cards, right? So I will say that I don't think swapping out a Solemn Judgment or even a Solemn Strike for a Nadir Servant is worth it. However, I can definitely see the arguments about Dark Magical Circle. Dark Magical Circle is a card that is searchable via Rod and Soul Servant, right? It's not a card that really does anything by itself. So one would argue that a Nadir Servant is absolutely better than Dark Magical Circle. However, it's not so much better that I would take out both my circles to put into Nadir Servant. It's good to have at least one circle because, at the end of the day, Dark Magician is a control deck. You're in there for the long game, and having access to a circle allows you to grind out like multiple turns if necessary. It just gives you that longevity, right? Um, Also, Circle does have a few of like standalone uses, including its synergy with Upstart Goblin, the ability that for you to use Magician Souls to send, look at the top 3 of your deck, send Circle to the graveyard to draw a card you really need. So it's not without its uses. Like it's not a, in a big playmaker or like an interruption, but it has its utility, right? So I will say I am open-minded, and I did take some of these suggestions into consideration. Um, and I decided, or at least I decided to at least try out um, taking out one circle and bumping Nadir's Servant back up to 2. Okay, so um, before I did this or committed to this, I decided to run some simulations. So some of you may have seen my spreadsheet before, but I keep a spreadsheet here, which I'll show you, um, where I basically open EDO Pro, build my deck, and then run a bunch of test hands. So for example, like if I have this deck here, I can just run test hand, and then see what board I can make with this opening hand. So in this case, I actually opened like an amazing board, or an amazing opening hand, and like, I mean, I'm not going to play it out, but like, Rod Souls can make Dragoon, Engage can search Eagle Booster, Nadir, or Nadir can grab Ecclesia, which can also grab in Fleur de Lis, which can also grab. So there's multiple, things I can do with this hand, right? So anyway, based on the test hand, right? So I do my test hand, I play it out, see what my end board is, and then record the stats in the row here. So for example, like for each hand simulation, I say like, oh, how many Dragoons did I get, right? Like, so I mean, some cases I might end with 2 Dragoons, some cases with 1 Dragoon, sometimes 0 Dragoons, right? Like how many of my side deck cards did I get? Side deck being, so I have a set number of cards in my deck that I consider side deck slots. So like the core of my deck, which is basically like everything from this Dark Magician all the way down to, uh, well, most of this deck is core. Like, uh, so I would say like cards that are not core are, let's see. Okay, so every card to the left of Salvation here is a core card that I would never side out. Um, and actually, well, that's not 100% true. Yeah, yeah, I would never side out these cards. This is like the core of the deck. So this is what, like 27 cards are in my core, and then the remaining 13 cards are all cards here that I would potentially side out in game 2 or 3, depending on the matchup, right? So I have 13 side deck slots, right? And these 13 slide deck slots can, side out my slide deck. Anyway, so that's what this cell is here. DMC means Dark Magical Circle. How many boards did I end with Circle? How many boards did I end with Eternal Soul? How many boards did I end with both? How many bricks did I draw? So a brick, I consider a brick to be a card that um, I can't do anything with it. Like, so for example, if I open a Red Eyes Black Dragon in my opening hand, that is a brick. Like, I'll set the numbers to 1. If I open Dark Magician Girl, that is a brick. I'll set this number to 1. If I open Red Eyes and Dark Magician Girl, this will be a 2, right? So whatever cards, like, I open in my hand that I can't do anything with, like, by themselves, I consider a brick. So I'll record in this column, in this cell, like, how many bricks did I draw in that hand, and then I'll record in this cell here, like, how many of my hand is a total brick. Total brick means I'm completely screwed. I have no interruptions. I have no follow-up plays for the next turn. Uh, I'm just gonna get, I might as well just scoop kind of situation, right? Um, and I'm not to say that the game is like completely hopeless. Like, there are some hands where you might be able to survive and make a follow-up play in the following turn, depending on how good your opponent's hand is. I don't consider that hand a total brick, but there are some hands where you're just like, there's nothing I can do here. Like, no follow-ups, nothing. Everything's just garbage, right? Then I would set this to a 1 if that were the case. And then interruptions is how many of my end boards, of course this is assuming going first. All these simulations are assuming I go first with a 5-card hand. Obviously these numbers would change if I go second with a 6-card hand, but basically, like, how many interruptions does my end board have, right? Interruptions being traps or quick effects or whatever that I can use on my opponent's turn to stop or disrupt their plays, right? So that's what this cell is. Anyway, so I do that 100 times. So all the way down, right? And then I have these values here record the final stats. So this simulation that you're seeing, which I call Dogmatika Dark Magician, this was what I ran with when I had 3 Nadir Servant. So with 3 Nadir Servant, I ended on Dragoon 74 out of 100 hands, opening hands. I drew an average of 1.69 side deck cards per game, or side deck slots. I drew an average of 0.31 bricks per game. I totally bricked 3 out of 100 games, and maybe you could even say this is lowballing it. Like, again, I consider a total brick to be like, there's absolutely nothing I can do, period. Like, I might as well just scoop. Whereas there might have been a few hands that were questionable where, like, I may be able to have a decent follow-up on the second turn if I don't get OTK'd. Like, so maybe, this number is a little deceptive. It depends on what exactly how you define what it means to be a total brick hand. Um, I consider like a hand to not be a total brick if I can do something, right? Just anything, um, and possibly follow up on the second turn. All right. Average interruptions is how many on average, when I finish my end board, how many interruptions or disruptions do I have for my opponent's turn, right? In this case, an average of 2.8, which maybe you can round to 2.9 or like 3, whatever. Like, not bad. How many games did I end on Eternal Soul? How many games did I end on Eternal Soul and Dark Magical Circle? How many games did I end with Dragoon and Eternal Soul? Right? How many games did I end with Dragoon plus Circle plus Soul? How many? And then how many? What was the average rate of Dragoon plus a side deck card? Right? So for example, Dragoon and Judgment, or Dragoon and Goes and Match. Like, yeah. So anyway, I record. So these values are calculated from the stats that I input here for my simulations, right? So anyway, I ran 3 simulations, each of them 100 hands. And maybe you would argue maybe 100 hands is not large enough. I'm not, I don't have the time to do like 1,000 hands. Ideally, 1,000 would be better. Although I am speaking to someone in the Dark Magician community about the possibility of writing a computer program that may be able to calculate and run these simulations, automated, right, like on a computer, rather than like having to sit through 100 hand simulations. So maybe one day I'll be able to actually, like, collaborate with this person, maybe help put out, like, make this code actually happen, and we'll get better results. But I think 100 hands is fairly decent. Like, it's a fairly large number. Anyway, and then I ran the same another 100 simulations using the deck profile that I showcased last night in my previous video, using that only had 1 Nadir Servant, right, where I have the 2 Ice Dragons Prisons, and I have, and then I ran the simulation, the 100 simulations with the deck profile that uses 2 Nadir Servant, taking out 1 Dark Magical Circle. So at first glance, the total number of games where I ended the first turn with Dark Magical Circle definitely dropped off, right? So like here it's like 24 games with Dark Magical Circle with Eternal Soul, or 20 with Dragoon, and then like compared to, like, well, let's say when I had 2 of them, like here for example, 43, right? It's still like 29 when Dragoons when you factor in Dragoon, so it's not that much worse if you look at Dragoon and Dark Magical Circle and Eternal Soul. But yeah, definitely overall less Circle, right? But if you look at it, like, look at the average number of interruptions, right? So with 3 Nadir Servant, I have about 2.88 total, like, disruptions on my opponent's turn. With one Nadir Servant, I get about 2.8. So the number definitely went down, right? But then with two Nadir Servant, I actually was managed to get 3. And again, there is a margin of error, right? This is not a perfect simulation, but clearly I was able to, on average, right, over 100 hands, get the most interruptions with two Nadir Servant. So why is that? So remember, I am from 3. Remember, Nadir Servant is not. It is once per turn, right? And that means that if you open two Nadir Servant, they don't do anything, right? So by dropping Nadir Servant to 2 and then having two Ice Dragon's Prisons, 2 cards I did not have before, right? In my 3 Nadir Servant deck, I now have more interruptions in general, right? Ice Dragon's Prison is also once per turn, but because I'm having 2 ofs of each rather than 3 ofs, I'm actually, you know, I'm seeing, there's a solid chance that I see at least 1 of each, or 1 Nadir in my hand or 1 Ice Dragon's Prison in my hand, but the chance of me seeing 2 of them are just gone, right? So like if I open, 2 Ice Dragon's Prisons or 2 Nadir Servants while I'm doing these simulations, I consider that to be 1 interruption, right? Because it's a hard once per turn. Like I'm not going to count that as 2 interruptions on my opponent's turn, like because I literally can't use like 2 Ice Dragon's Prisons on my opponent's turn unless they like negate the activation using like Solemn Judgment or whatever card. Then I can use the second one. But I'm not relying on that. I'm not making that assumption. I'm just saying like Ice Dragon's Prison the card. If I have two in my opening hand, that's equivalent to having 1 disruption, right? Um, so yeah, so I guess I'm not too surprised to see this. It's somewhat expected. And then with 1 Nadir Servant, my average interruptions did go down. And why is that? So the thing about Nadir Servant, and I touched on this on my deck profile video yesterday, is Nadir Servants can produce 2 interruptions, right? If you and so why is that? So let's just do a quick simulation here where test hand settings. I'm gonna draw 1 card, right? So let's see what happens. All right. Well, whoops. Sorry. Not. I have to hit don't shuffle. Okay. So let's try this. So let's say I have 1 Nadir Servant, right? So with 1 Nadir Servant, I can activate it. I can send Titaniclad, grab Ecclesia, right? Then I can summon Ecclesia. Ecclesia will search me punishment. I can set punishment, and then on the end phase, I will add Floowandeeze to my hand, right? So what did I just do here? So with 1 card in Nadir Servant, I produce 2 interruptions, right? Because punishment is 1 interruption, right? Allows me to pop 1 and possibly 2 cards that my opponent has. That's 1 disruption on their turn. And the second disruption is, if I can special summon Floowandeeze, assuming they have an extra deck monster, and Floowandeeze will negate 1 of their monster effects. So that's 2 disruptions from 1 card. So yeah, Nadir Servant is a very good card. Never denied that. But the issue that we're talking about here is like, all right, but what is a good ratio for it, right? I'm actually starting to think that 2 is the way to go, right? Because with 3 Nadir Servant, I found too many hands where I open 2 Nadir Servants, so one of them is basically a brick, right? Because you can't play it that turn on the same turn. So yeah. So looking back at this spreadsheet here, not surprising that 1 Nadir Servant, overall led to fewer interruptions on my opponent's turn because, I would see it way less often, and when I did see it, it would produce like 2 interrupts for the most part, right? Like I could only do that combo if I don't Red Eyes Fusion. But like, in opening hands where I do not have Dragoon, so I don't have Dragoon maybe like about 25% of the time, like a Nadir Servant can set up a pretty solid board, right? To allow me to actually like have plays and like have follow-ups for the next turn. So, but yeah, so definitely you see here like Nadir Servants, 2 Nadir Servant is pretty good. In fact, another thing I want to mention is with 2 Nadir Servant, the average number of bricks went down, right? So if you look at 3 Nadir Servant here, 0.31 bricks per hand, and 1 Nadir Servant, 0.31 bricks per hand, so they're almost the same. I actually found that having 2 Nadir Servant reduced my average number of bricks per hand to 0.25, 0.26, right? So again, maybe it's not statistically significant, right? It might all be within a margin of error, but I did feel like what I and granted, maybe EDO Pro's randomizer is borked, but I did feel like my hands were less bricky. Like I had more plays I could make, and it makes sense, right? Like I less likely to draw two Nadir Servants, less like in my opening hand, which you don't want to see. You want to see one Nadir Servant in your opening hand if you can, right? And I feel like two Nadir, like having two in your deck, sounds like the pretty good ratio way to do this, right? I mean, we're not a Dogmatika, like Invoke Dogmatika engine. We're like, we want to see three Nadir Servant because that's like part of our main combo. Our main combo is like Dragoon, right? Like this Nadir Servant is like a side engine that just helps, that just either replaces your main combo if like you can't get Dragoon out, or like it adds to your main combo. So also, I know I said that this video was going to be short, and it's already like dragging on longer than I expected. But that's okay because this is a learning experience, right? So yeah, so definitely so we saw less Dark Magical Circle on the first turn, right? But if you have Rod in the graveyard, then that means you can almost always get Dark Magical Circle on the second turn, right? Which will be more interruptions, right? So the rate of seeing Eternal Soul on the first turn was the same, like across all three of these simulations, right? Um, or all three of these experiments. So also, I wonder if like, I guess maybe I should have zoomed in. Let me zoom in here on the. I really should be zooming in here on these numbers so y'all can see it better. All right. Hopefully you're watching this video full screen, but in retrospect, I should have done this. Okay. So, and even here, like this, I would actually say this is an outlier. In one out of 100 hands being total bricks, probably that's probably an outlier. Like I actually think it might be a little closer to the other two, like 3 and 4. I mean, maybe, right? Like, or maybe it does lead to fewer bricky hands or less bricky hands. So yeah, let's see what else I noticed. So rate of Dragoon was about the same, right? Around 75% of opening hands had you had a Dragoon in your opening board. So not bad. Average side draws are about the same. Actually, so I see slightly higher here for 3 Nadir Servants. So that's interesting. Not sure what that's about. Might be an outlier. But for 2 Nadir Servants, it's pretty. But then if you look at like Dragoon plus side deck cards, it's like all about the same, right? So yeah. So on average, you saw higher interruptions, and even if you might say, oh, that's a small difference, like 2.8, 2.9 versus 3. It's like, yeah, but this is an average, right? Average means like if like if your average is like 3, then you like expect to see 3. If it's less than 3, if it's like 2.8, you expect to see less than 3, right? You don't expect to see 3. It's like the expected value, right? So yeah, so I think I'm gonna go with this. I'm gonna go with 1 Dark Magical Circle and 2 Nadir Servants. I think that this is probably the best way to go. And like even playing through the test hands, I did feel like I had more plays overall. So it's not just like a number. Like it was also a feeling, right? And I was skeptical. Like last night I was perfectly okay dropping a Nadir to 1, and then some people mentioned that like, oh, maybe 2, like at least go over 2. Yeah, because 2, like uh, really increases, like significant increases how often you see it over 1. Whereas like 3, not as good, right? So yeah, so that's my change. Definitely gonna go with this. 2 Nadir Servant, 2 Ice Dragon's Prison, and yeah, I think these are the good ratios to go with. I'm probably still gonna side out Nadir Servant in game 2 and 3. So like this is mainly a game 1 thing, right? Um, Although before, when I had Dark Magical Circle, like at 2, that was 1 fewer side deck slot, right, that I had. So maybe because of that, I might actually be siding out Nadir Servant less often, perhaps. Um, I don't know, maybe. That's just I'm just conjecturing. But yeah, I think 2 is the way to go. So um, I still stand by like the logic from last night's video where I do think that the Dogmatica engine is like so good that these numbers don't make a huge difference, I don't think. Like think about it this way, like there's decks that run Dogmatic engines with Maximus in it, right? Um, and Maximus is a good card, but and like honestly, there's no reason why we can't run it. But and in fact, I think like some of the other Dark Magician content creators or players are running Maximus and doing some interesting like interactions with like cards like Chimera Flesia and stuff like um, and like yielding good results. But it's not necessary, right? Like you don't need it. Like I think even Lulza said once like, oh, you can like if you don't want to run any of the dogmatic engines, just have Fleur de Lis because Fleur de Lis can be sent off souls, right? And it's a free summon most of the time. Uh, so yeah, like yeah, the examples I gave in last night's videos were like, oh, you can run the Ecclesia Punishment, your Gucci. You could honestly, you can just run Fleur de Lis, right? You have a 2500 beater that's like basically a free summon, becomes 3k attack, right? Um, sent can be sent from souls. So yeah, like even Fleur de Lis by itself, like maybe that wouldn't call that an engine, but it's like it's still a Dogmatica support card, right? That can be useful. One other thing I wanted to mention that I didn't quite emphasize in yesterday's video about Psyframe Gear Omega. So I mentioned how like Psyframe Gear Omega can be used from like these dogmatic, like you send it to graveyard from the dogmatic engine, and you can bounce Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer back into their extra deck, right, and no longer have to deal with it. Another thing you can do with Psyframe Lord Omega is you can bounce Red Eyes Black Dragon back into your deck. And then that means that your second and third copies of Red Eyes Fusion are live, right? Like, I mean, granted, we have a lot of ways to summon Dragoon already, and we're getting some new support like through the Albaz. Well, by we I mean not Dark Magician. Like Dark Magician isn't getting new archetype cards, but like Fallen of Albaz and like the branded stuff is getting new support in the Fallen of Albaz structure deck that comes out. I think it's March or April of next year. It has like that new branded fusion, and I think Lalza talked about this, and maybe a few of the other content creators might have mentioned this on this channel. And when that comes out, like I'll definitely talk about it. But yeah, branded fusion is gonna make Dragoon even more accessible, right? So like you have Omega that you can send to recycle your Red Eyes Black Dragon and make your further copies of your Red Eyes Fusion live, right? Um, yeah, this is just yet another way to summon Dragoon again, right? We already have so many, and like yeah, this is just this is a detail that I forgot to mention last night. Like, oh, let's say your opponent doesn't have Destroy Phoenix Forza. Well, just use this guy to send Red Eyes Black Dragon back in your deck. Like maybe if I say, oh, aren't you bricking your deck? Like maybe, but you're unbrick if like on one hand you're bricking your deck by putting a Red Eyes Black in it, but you're unbricking your other two copies of Red Eyes Fusion, right? By uh making them useful, like or at least more useful than just discard fodder, right? So yeah, just an interesting thing I wanted to mention. Don't be surprised if the future of Dark Magician involves having 3 Dragoons in the extra deck because I don't know with all the branded fusion stuff and like and how I think the branded fusion engine like recycles the fusion materials back into the deck. We could definitely possibly see a day where the meta or like the correct ratio of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon in Dark Magician deck is 3 instead of 2, right? So stay tuned for that because that would be pretty hilarious. But yeah, this Omega strategy like or like option just strengthens that argument, right? Um, I think I already mentioned how like in my pre-release deck for Dark Magician with the new support, um, I'm running Secrets of Dark Magic, so that which is yet another way to make Dragoon. I also did a similar thing here. So in this deck before, I added in 1 Ice Dragon's Prison and took out a Dark Magical Circle. So I'm not running the Dogmatica and Sky Striker uh, engine in the future support like with Illusion of Chaos. So I did have Circle at 2, and I did bump Circle down to 1 to add an Ice Dragon's Prison. 1 Ice Dragon's Prison is not ideal. I'd rather have 2, right? So getting a second Ice Dragon's Prison in this deck will probably involve removing either Apprentice Illusion Magician, that's kind of an optional card, or um, Illusion of Chaos, and sitting at having 2 of these, right? Which, okay, that sounds sinful. Like this card is amazing. Like why would you want to already drop this down to 2? It's a once per turn named effect, right? But 3 preparation of rights is not once per turn. So, like, if we do drop this engine, like Invasion Illusion of Chaos with prep, if we do want to drop a card from here, it's better to keep 3 prep and 2 illusion rather than 2 prep and 3 illusion, because prep is not once per turn and illusion is. Maybe I drop Secrets of Dark Magic. I don't know. I do like Secrets of Dark Magic. With the new support, because Salravis is a dragon, makes it easier to make Dragoon. Illusion of Chaos can fuse with Dark Magician to make Dark Master of Chaos, right? Or I don't know, like I don't want to drop Secrets of Dark Magic in the new support, but I do want a second Ice Dragon's Prison. So something's gonna gotta give. Maybe I do. Yeah. So once this card comes out, and although I suppose since I have EDO Pro, I can already start testing. I can test running 2 of these versus running 3 and having that extra Ice Dragon's Prison, and then going into my spreadsheet and see, because I think I already did I already have a spreadsheet here, a tab here that shows the new support for Dark Magician, and the numbers are all like super up. Like total Dragoons, like instead of 75% of the time you open Dragoon, you're opening like 90% of the time, right? Your average bricks has dropped, like significantly dropped, because Illusion of Chaos unbricks your hand, right? Uh, Hands that total bricks went to 0. Like I never drew a hand that was completely useless, right? Average interruptions like way up to 3.15. So like that means your expected value, you expect to have more than 3 interruptions on your opponent's turn, right? And so this here, this simulation that you're seeing is with the new support like Illusion Chaos Prep with 2 Dark Magical Circle, right? Now imagine if I drop Dark Magical Circle down to 1, I bump up, I bump Illusion Chaos down to 2 instead of 3, and I add 2 Ice Dragon's Prison. I'm curious how high I can get some of these numbers, right? Although, I'll have to see, like, does losing that 3rd Illusion of Chaos give us more bricks in our hand? Or fewer Dragoons? Or fewer, I don't know. I'll have to run the simulation to see, right? But these numbers are looking very promising already for, with 2 Circle, 1 Soul, I'm seeing Eternal Soul 78 out of 100 times, right? With 1 copy of it in my deck. Like, how insane is that? Because I almost always have Rod, and Rod almost always searches, like, Salvation / Eternal Soul, right? So, like I'm seeing way more Dragoon, like, boards with Dragoon and Circle and Soul, right? Granted, this is with 2 Circle. So, I'll run that simulation because, this is the deck that I'm going to be playing YCS with, so I'm definitely going to have to do a lot of play testing, a lot of simulation, but I definitely want an Ice Dragon's Prison in this deck, right? Like 2 of them at least. So right now I bumped Circle down to 1 and put in 1 copy, and I'm going to play test whether dropping Illusion of Chaos down to 2 makes sense. Or maybe this Apprentice Illusion Magician isn't might not be worthwhile, right? I mean, it is an opening, and you can technically consider it a battle phase around. Like, so someone tries to attack your Dragoon with Access Code Talker, like your 4,000 attack Dragoon versus a 5,300 Access Code Talker. This Apprentice Illusion Magician will kill the Access Code Talker, right? So yeah, there's that kind of like disruption and interruption to consider. So yeah, anyway, thank you for all who commented and talked to me about my deck profile and gave your suggestions. I do, this is a learning process for everyone. Like, I'm not like the end all be all like expert and about knowing everything about Dark Magician, or think that this is this is the only way to play. Like, there's other ways to build. But yeah, thanks for the suggestions though. I do appreciate it, and think that running 2 Nadir, at least until we get the new Dark Magician support, is probably the best ratio at the moment. Given my logic of I want to have these Ice Dragon's Prisons in my deck. One other thing I wanted to mention, because I think Lalza brought this up in the comments, is because I think I mentioned Floowandeeze as like an example of like Ice Dragon's Prison is good against Floowandeeze, right? And then Lalza's like, well, the Floowandeeze monsters want to get banished. Well, I will say that it's true that the Floowandeeze monsters, the starting monsters, right, like the little birds, want to be banished, but the big birds don't. M-Pen does not have an effect that it can activate while it's banished to recycle it back to the hand. Snarl does not have that either. Mega Monarch Ryza does not have that. Avian Apex, Miss Valley Apex or whatever does not have that. So yeah, if you can literally hit two birds with one stone, like let's say they already have a dead M pen or whatever, like maybe you Solemn Judgmented their M pen and it's in the graveyard, and then they bring out Miss Valley Avian Apex, or maybe they bring out Ryza. You can use Ice Dragon's Prison, and now M pen and Ryza or whatever are now banished, right? Not to say it's the end of the world, because Floowandeeze does have the combo of Stritch plus Token, which can recycle cards from the graveyard or banish pile back into the hand, regardless of whether they have their own recycling effects. But so yeah, so I will say yes, it's against the little birds. This doesn't make any sense, and in fact, but the big birds do get hit pretty hard if you can Ice Dragon's Prison them. Yeah. So sorry if I made it seem like Ice Dragon's Prison was amazing against Floowandeeze. I would say it's okay, at best. I would probably side it out against Floowandeeze if I was playing against them. Um, if going first, I would going first against Floowandeeze. I would, if I game two or whatever, I would probably take out the Ice Dragon's Prisons, put in the Solemn Strikes, put in Drolls, and the Secret Village package, right? Because they are pretty dependent on some of their spells as well, like the map. If you can Secret Village them, they can't map. That's half of their combo potential gone, right? Anyway, I don't want to get into matchups right now, but yeah. So just to clarify what I meant yesterday about, oh, this is good against Floowandeeze. It's decent. It's like Floowandeeze is a meta deck that Ice Dragon Springs can do something against. Whereas if you think about the previous format back in the pre-October format, where the strongest decks were uh, Virtual World, Tri Brigade, Drytron, Ice Dragon's Prison did almost nothing to those decks. But now those are the top three decks. But now Ice Dragon's Prison does do so. Even to Floowandeeze, which is not as effective as against Sword Sword or whatever. Ice Dragon's Prison is still okay. Anyway, so yeah, let me know what y'all think. Feel free to comment further. Um, yeah, I think I feel pretty good about this change, and I definitely will be playtesting this online and in person, and let y'all know how I feel about real life results. Yeah, so take care, and hope y'all learned something, and hope this made you more excited to want to play Dark Magician, or get into the theory crafting and deck building process as well. All right, take care, bye.